The room was buzzing with anticipation. It was a high-profile press conference in Washington, D.C., and the air was thick with tension. Journalists from all over the country had gathered, their cameras and microphones ready to capture every word. At the center of it all was Melania Trump, the former First Lady, poised and elegant as always. She was there to speak about her latest initiative, a campaign to support children's education and well-being. The room was filled with a mix of supporters and critics, but Melania remained calm, her demeanor unshakable. As she began her speech, the crowd fell silent. Her words were measured and thoughtful, emphasizing the importance of kindness and compassion in today's world. She spoke about her own experiences as a mother and how they had shaped her commitment to helping children in need. The audience listened intently, many nodding in agreement. But not everyone was there to support her. Among the crowd was a well-known liberal journalist, Mark Stevens, who had built a reputation for his sharp, often confrontational style. He sat near the front, his arms crossed, a skeptical look on his face. Melania continued her speech, her voice steady and confident. "We must remember that every child deserves a chance to succeed, regardless of their background or circumstances," she said, her words resonating with many in the room. But just as she was about to conclude, Mark raised his hand, signaling that he had a question. The moderator hesitated for a moment, but eventually called on him. The room tensed, sensing that something was about to happen. Mark stood up, his expression smug. "Mrs. Trump," he began, his tone dripping with sarcasm, "you talk a lot about kindness and compassion, but many people see you as someone who has benefited from privilege and power. How do you respond to those who say your initiatives are just a way to improve your public image?" The room fell silent, the tension palpable. All eyes turned to Melania, waiting to see how she would respond. Melania paused for a moment, her face unreadable. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Mark's question had been designed to provoke, and it had worked. The journalists around him shifted uncomfortably, some whispering to each other. Melania's supporters in the audience looked outraged, while her critics leaned forward, eager to see how she would handle the confrontation. But Melania didn't flinch. She looked directly at Mark, her gaze steady and calm. "Thank you for your question," she said, her voice measured. "I understand that not everyone will agree with my work or my intentions, but I can assure you that my commitment to helping children is genuine. I have seen the struggles that many families face, and I believe it is our responsibility to do what we can to support them." Mark wasn't satisfied. He smirked, clearly enjoying the moment. "With all due respect, Mrs. Trump," he said, his tone even more sarcastic, "many people see you as someone who has lived a life of luxury, far removed from the struggles of everyday Americans. How can you possibly relate to the challenges that these families face?" The room erupted in murmurs. Some journalists nodded in agreement, while others looked uncomfortable. Melania's supporters were visibly angry, but she remained composed. She took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving Mark's. "I may have been fortunate in my life," she said, her voice firm, "but that does not mean I am blind to the struggles of others. In fact, it is because of my experiences that I feel a responsibility to give back. I have seen the impact that kindness and support can have, and I am committed to making a difference." Mark opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, a voice from the back of the room interrupted him. "That's enough." The voice was deep and commanding, and everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Donald Trump, the former president, who had been standing quietly at the back of the room. He stepped forward, his presence immediately shifting the energy in the room. The room fell silent as Donald Trump made his way to the front. His expression was stern, his eyes fixed on Mark. The tension in the room was palpable, and everyone seemed to hold their breath as Trump approached the podium. Melania looked at her husband, a small smile playing on her lips. She knew what was coming. Trump stepped up to the microphone, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "Let me tell you something," he began, his voice booming. "What I just witnessed here is disgraceful. My wife, Melania, has dedicated her life to helping others, and she doesn't deserve to be treated with such disrespect." He turned to Mark, his eyes narrowing. "You, sir, should be ashamed of yourself." Mark shifted uncomfortably, his smirk fading. He opened his mouth to respond, but Trump cut him off. "No, no, no," Trump said, waving his hand dismissively. "You've had your say. Now it's my turn." The room was silent, everyone hanging on Trump's every word. He turned back to the audience, his voice filled with passion. "Melania is one of the most compassionate, caring people I know. She has worked tirelessly to make a difference in the lives of children, and she doesn't deserve to be attacked like this." The crowd erupted into applause, many of them standing up to show their support. Trump's words had struck a chord, and even some of the journalists who had been skeptical of Melania were now nodding in agreement. Mark, meanwhile, looked visibly shaken. He had clearly not expected Trump to intervene, and he was now realizing the gravity of his mistake. Trump turned back to Mark, his expression softening slightly. "I understand that you have a job to do," he said, his tone more measured. "But there's a way to ask questions without being disrespectful. My wife deserves better than that, and so do the people she's trying to help." Mark nodded, his face red with embarrassment. He sat down, clearly chastened. The room was still buzzing with energy as Trump stepped back from the microphone. The applause continued, and many in the audience were visibly moved by his words. Melania stepped forward, her smile warm and gracious. "Thank you, Donald," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "And thank you all for your support. I believe that we can make a difference if we work together, and I am committed to doing everything I can to help those in need." The crowd erupted into cheers once more, their earlier tension replaced by a sense of unity and hope. Even some of the journalists who had been critical of Melania were now clapping, their skepticism replaced by respect. Mark, meanwhile, remained seated, his head down. He knew he had crossed a line, and he was now facing the consequences of his actions. As the press conference continued, the tone shifted dramatically. The questions that followed were respectful and thoughtful, and Melania answered them with grace and poise. The earlier confrontation seemed to have brought the room together, and the focus returned to the important work that Melania was doing. When the event finally came to an end, the crowd gave Melania a standing ovation. She smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you all for your support," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Together, we can make a difference." As the room began to empty, Mark remained seated, his mind racing. He knew that his career as a journalist was on the line. The video of his confrontation with Melania and Trump's response was already going viral, and the backlash was swift and brutal. Social media was flooded with comments condemning his behavior, and many of his colleagues were distancing themselves from him. Mark's editor called him shortly after the event, his tone stern. "What were you thinking?" he demanded. "You've put the entire organization in a difficult position. We're getting calls from all over the country, and the backlash is overwhelming." Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I just wanted to ask a tough question." "Well, you went too far," his editor replied. "And now we're dealing with the fallout. I suggest you take some time off and think about how you want to move forward." Mark nodded, his heart sinking. He knew that his career would never be the same. Meanwhile, Melania and Trump left the event together, their heads held high. They knew that they had handled the situation with grace and dignity, and they were proud of the way they had stood up for what was right. As they walked to their car, Melania turned to Trump, her smile warm. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You always know how to handle these situations." Trump smiled, his eyes twinkling. "That's what I'm here for," he said. "No one messes with my family." Melania laughed, her heart filled with love and appreciation. She knew that no matter what challenges they faced, they would always have each other's backs. In the days that followed, the video of the press conference continued to circulate, sparking a national conversation about respect and civility in journalism. Many praised Melania for her grace under pressure, while others commended Trump for standing up for his wife. Mark, meanwhile, became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of crossing the line in pursuit of a story. Melania's initiative gained even more support, with many people inspired by her commitment to helping children. She continued to work tirelessly, her focus unwavering. And through it all, she remained a symbol of strength and resilience, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, kindness and compassion can prevail. As for Mark, he eventually issued a public apology, acknowledging that he had gone too far. "I let my personal biases get in the way of my professionalism," he said in a statement. "I deeply regret my actions and the hurt they caused." While some accepted his apology, others were less forgiving. His career never fully recovered, and he became a cautionary tale for journalists everywhere. In the end, the incident served as a powerful reminder of the importance of respect and civility, even in the face of disagreement. Melania and Trump had shown that standing up for what is right can make a difference, and their actions inspired millions around the world. And as they continued their work, they knew that they had made a lasting impact, not just on the lives of the children they were helping, but on the world as a whole.